Hello, everybody. My name is John. I started Hazelnut Community Farm, and one of the questions I get quite a bit is where did this come from? Where did this idea start, and what's the history of all this? And so I wanted to do a bit of recording, both so that new members could see this and people who are interested in hazelnut could kind of get an idea of the flavor of where what we do came from. So the idea actually started a long time ago. So when I'm recording this now, it's January 2022, but the dream kind of started all the way back in 2006. Then I was with my fiance, who's now been my wife for like 15 years, and we were living in Kansas City in America because I'm American. And we were walking around kind of the city of Kansas City, and we saw this building for sale, and it's a multi-story city center building. And I remember looking at it, and we just began to kind of dream a little bit. And I just said to Pips, "What if?" Pippa, who was my wife, I said, "What if you did like a church here? What if one floor had a cafe and another floor had a church and an area for arts and all these different things you could do there?" And it was just really fun. It was really fun just to kind of dream. And I think that's really important because when I think of this whole vision, it was almost like a seed that was planted in is this kind of question of what if and kind of permission to dream a little bit. I think sometimes we think of the church in such a strong structure that to dream about church is to dream about adding another worship song or changing a service time, but actually giving permission to say, what if the whole structure, what if the whole kind of method of delivery was flipped and turned on its head, and we kept the core things of Christ at the center, but we were able to dream past that. And so it started something in me where it was just this desire to kind of dream for what churches could look like. So if that's in 2006, flash forward to 2011, and now I'm living in Scotland with my wife, and we have a baby with us now, little Zoe, and we spent all of our weekends going off on day trips all around the countryside. And one day we went down to Melrose in the Borders. We went to Melrose Abbey, and it's this beautiful kind of ruins of this abbey, this old church. And as you walk through it, there's all these kind of different descriptions of what life used to be like back in the day. And it just absolutely captured my imagination. This idea that the church at that time was all about raising animals, caring for the land, growing food, giving it away, education, medicine, a home for those that were, or a place to stay for those that were traveling, rhythms of prayer and worship. And I just thought, wow, that sounds like the way church should be. That sounds absolutely amazing. And it really kind of stuck with me. And so it kind of that kind of day led me to start thinking about new monasticism, which is how do you kind of reinvent, or not reinvent, but take some of the key principles from our old monastic brothers and sisters and pull them forward into a modern context. So I just found that as time went on and I moved through the ordination process with the Church of England, that I just couldn't let some of those dreams go, some of those old dreams from 2006 and those monastic dreams. So as I kind of come out to about 2016 now, I'm at Trinity College in Bristol, and kind of every paper that I wrote, I couldn't help put information about new monasticism or community development, and it just kind of got my mind going. And so I started just kind of chatting about it, and I just found there's a lot of other people that are being drawn to these ideas. And a friend of mine, Lucy, and I tried to start something called Common Hope, and it just didn't really quite have a direction, but it was around, how do we gather around some of these things, and how do we do that in kind of a bit of a dispersed way. So Common Hope kind of comes to an end. I'm in my curacy. I'm a pioneer curate, so it means I have permission to kind of try different things and go outside the walls. And I felt like I was almost in a discernment process of asking, well, what does pioneering look like for me? What's my process for that? So I began to pray about it. And then a key date for all of this is March 4th, 2019. So I've been praying for a while. God, how, I love ministry. How do I do a pioneering ministry? Felt like there was something in my bones to do, but I didn't know what it was. So May 4th, 2019, I take my kids to Windmill City Farm in the center of Bristol, and it was an absolutely gorgeous, beautiful day. The sun was shining out, and oh, it was just absolutely stunning. And as I was standing in the midst of this, my kids were off their screens and they were playing. I looked around, and um, there were kind of allotment beds where people were working. There were people having lunch and little rooms for education and animals all around, and a whole range of types of people and ages. And I thought, oh, this feels like church just without the spiritual space. I know it sounds funny because what's church without spiritual space? But it felt like the kind of working out of a new monasticism. And what happened is this kind of what had been so stuck within buildings, my ideas and thoughts, all of a sudden kind of moved out of the buildings and moved into the land, and actually saw some of these dreams as something that had to be worked out in land. And that was the season that we're in. So that led, as I'm kind of standing rooted in this place, what I really believe is a very spiritually significant moment, where along with this kind of monastic dream coming about in land, I had what Pope Francis in his book Laudato Si calls climate conversion, where my eyes were kind of opened, and I had always thought the ecological and climate emergency was essentially really important. But all of a sudden, I understood this is the issue that we're facing and being called to minister in and live in today. And it changes everything. So I kind of left that city farm having had what feels like a real eye-opening, amazing experience. And I came in as kind of John having a question about what to do. And I left saying, it's time to start kind of a Christian city farm. And it was crazy because I have no experience at all. And it was time just to throw myself into it. So, yeah, and I think a big part of that too is just having this eye-opening experience about ecological emergency is important, because one of the things that solidified in me is that my whole ministry and anyone that I call to or work with, our time is to work in a time of change where I'll never see again where we were, and the church will never be how it has been or what people imagine it's been in the past, and I'll never see the fulfillment of where it's going. I'm called to be a movement, like a someone who's traveling in a time of change, and it has really helped me because I think in the church now, people don't see that we're on this hinge moment, and there's a lot of argument going around because a lot of the church wants to just think, oh, if we can just get back to where we were, or a lot of church says, oh, we'll just reimagine and fix this thing. The truth is that I think we're in a time of change, and it's not going to be where we're heading is not going to be done anytime soon. So it's how do we create places that we can flourish in the midst of this? And that's one of our main visions. How do we create communities in a church that flourishes in a time of climate emergency? That's our vision, is creating these types of communities. So kind of the way this works out is that it wasn't easy. I didn't have land, and I started talking to people, and I started throwing myself into it, throwing myself into gardening, visiting spaces, talking and doing anything that I can. And part of that was also kind of believing that I want to plant and get land in an area that wasn't kind of a middle class or upper class area, but a place of where there was kind of a place of need as well. So I sent out. I love this area in Bristol called Loch Lees. I had spoken at church there, and so I ended up just emailing everybody that I could. I emailed counselors and vicars and pastors and people, anybody who would get back to me. And a counselor ended up getting back to me, counselor over Loch Lees, and introduced me to a key person named Maria in Loch Lees, and we walked around this area. And over time, we kind of kept communicating, and I made a pitch to say, well, what if we got a piece of land in this area? And she came back And she said, actually, we have a community garden that needs people to look after it. And the people that have just looked after it have just said they can't do it anymore because we're in the midst of a pandemic and they're key workers. And they're happy to pass it on. So in September 2020, and so it was like a year and a half after kind of dreaming and all of this, we ended up getting our first piece of land, and it was an absolute blast. We just loved getting on it. But the truth is, we were only there for a little while before we went back into lockdown. So we had to learn kind of this whole online way of doing it. So step forward kind of a year from then, and now we're in March 2021. We're just coming out of, I don't know, a third lockdown. And I was virtually showing around Bristol City Deanery pieces of land, or our piece of land in Lochleys, and a chap named James Wilson, who's at Gregory the Great, saw our land and said, "Oh, I've got a piece of land for you." And he showed us Eden Grove in Upper Horfield. So it's about 8-minute drive away with polytunnels and land. And he said, "What if you could do something here?" So that's how we ended up getting our second piece of land and working there. And we just love both those areas, and we love the people and all that we've been able to do. So it's been an amazing journey. And I think part of the reason we're sharing this too is that this is, in a sense, very much a lot of this is kind of my story. But as this is built, what I'm realizing is that this has changed from my story to our story. And actually, there's been a lot of people that have begun to gather around this and what we're doing at Hazelnut. And it's just been amazing the number of people and stories that have gathered around this, that it's a much larger story now than just kind of the seeds that were planted in me. So when we kind of talk about a vision, we talk about this as kind of the seed, but now we've kind of broken ground, and there's a whole bunch of seeds that are coming out of the ground, and we're really growing as a community. And I hope that will be evident too in later ways that we talk about our vision and who we are. I hope that was helpful and you enjoyed it. God bless.